welcome to another session on Chat with Chamindra. And it's been a while since I had the last chat uh, with you all and connected with you all. But and we are in a new month also, in the month of September. And today, I think the wait was worthwhile because I got a very special person with me today, Mr. Ashok Ferrey, a Sri Lankan who has achieved great heights in the world of literature, and someone I've got to know through my good friend Dilshan Bhuvange, and I should thank him for connecting with me, Ashok with me. So, big thank you goes out to him as well. So, Ashok is, if I give an introduction, I think many of you who's into English literature in Sri Lanka especially, must be knowing him. But I just give a small introduction. He's a Sri Lankan who has done really well in the world of literature. He has won the Gratian Prize in 2021, if I'm not mistaken. I'm right, 2021.
I think that's, I can never remember because it's always a year behind it's the previous year. So 2021, I think it's right.
Yeah. So he's won the Gratian Prize for his book Unmarriageable Man, and he has written 7 books overall, and he has written new books as well, which we'll have do a deep dive into in this discussion as well. So before we start, Ashok, so I gave a small introduction. Why don't you give us I know when people talk about introducing themselves, they give those, the whole, whole like whole essay kind of a thing.
Life is too short. Life is too short. I think you've done fine. You've done fine, Chamindra. What you said is absolutely correct. The only thing I would add is that I'm called a writer, but I still think I'm sort of masquerading. I'm just a horror writer because I've done lots of things in my life, and writing came to me at the age of 42. So still I'm not qualified to be a writer. When you have all these famous writers talking about this one or that one or Shakespeare or whatever, I feel like a complete fraud because I'm originally a mathematician by trade. So writing is like an accidental byproduct, something that happened along the way. That's the only thing I'd like to add.
Superb. So, Ashok, actually, that's what I wanted to ask you. The next question: what got you into writing? And
Sorry.
What got you into writing? I mean, what
brought me into it?
Yeah. How? What?
Yeah.
Because based on your profession also, and sometimes it's very difficult to find time in writing as well. To write books and do this writing. What got you into it? Yeah.
I think stress. In one word, stress. I was looking after my father who had cancer. My mother had gone to pieces. She couldn't cope at all because after 50 years of being married to somebody, to see them sort of fade away in front of your eyes can't be an easy thing. My brother, I have a brother and a sister. My brother's a doctor in New York. My sister's in London. So I was the only person here. And I didn't know how to cope either. So it was very traumatic for me. And I'm not the sort of person who expresses themselves very well. I just get on with it and try and do the best I can. I was also relatively new to this country. So I didn't also understand too well how things work here and how, you may be promised something, a test, a medical test, or this or that, and it doesn't arrive, or there's a room for error. Those things I was not prepared for. Anyway, cut a long story short, the stress in some strange way brought out this other part of me. I remember bringing my father back from Maharagama, from the cancer hospital, and we came back in a tuk-tuk. I forced him to eat a banana because I knew that once he'd had the chemo and the radio, he couldn't eat another thing for 2 days. He would not be able to eat. He was feeling nauseous and vomitish. So brought him back. He collapsed on the bed in the end room of my house. I don't know what possessed me. I went into the next room, which was my son's room, and found a little pencil and an exercise book, a Rahima's exercise book, and I just started writing. But the funny thing was the writing had nothing to do with the cancer, Nothing, nothing, nothing. It was just a story. And it was one of the funniest stories I ever wrote. And it actually appears in this book called Pretty People, which is the very first book I wrote. And it's the first story in that first book. And you know what? It's really quite funny. So that's the other thing, that you may be in the middle of tragedy, but you're laughing. And it's not that I was trying to trivialize my father's oncoming death. It's just that was my way of coping, I think, with the sadness.
So, I mean, you are relating a story which is close to my heart as well, because my father passed away also from a cancer. And I was in a situation where I had a newborn on the one side, and my father was, breathing his
Dying on
last
the
breath the other side. So I had that, have to balance that both areas together. And it was kind of the same kind of situation I also felt. What I did was something similar to you as well. I didn't go for the novel kind of thing, but I wrote down sometimes the pains you have, the traumas you have in your mind, and everything. Sometimes when you write it down in words, that pain goes away, isn't it?
Yeah, it kind of externalizes it. It puts it there on a plate. Now, what I find now, I've been writing for God knows 30 years, 20 years, whatever, since 2000. 20 years minimum, more like about 22, 23. What I find is that when you deal with a subject in a book and you write about it, and you close that book and it's published and printed and published and people buy the book, somehow it leaves you. The pain leaves you. I don't know why this is. The memory also leaves you. So, like, it's as if you put in a full stop at the end of a sentence. That's it. I mean, people call it closure, people call it all sorts of stuff. It's nothing like that. It's frankly, I think your body says, enough. I've dealt with this, I've buried it, or I've shoved it to a side. That's it. Ta-ta. It's gone. You know?
I'm moving on, right? Because there's a whole life there and I have to move on. But the thing is, also the important part, you need to move on, right? You have to move on, otherwise.
Yeah. Otherwise, your life is. But there's also a flip side to this, which is like something that people don't account for. You get rid of it from your system, perhaps from your conscious system, but it is always there inside you. So you made this decision to put it out there, and by sharing it with other people, it makes that it makes the weight less heavy. It makes the load less heavy. But it's always there underneath, and you can recall it should you want. I don't think you should, because by replaying the record over and over, you are just destroying yourself. So you shouldn't replay it, but be aware that it is there. And like it took me, as I said, 20 years, 24, to deal with that subject of grief. And it's in my latest book. The Unmarriageable Man. That's a very kind of like flippant title, which the marketing people at Penguin decided was what would make the book sell. But actually, it's a very serious book. It's about grief and how it is actually really difficult to deal with it. And nobody tells you. We all have dead or dying relatives. It will happen to us at least once in our life. But nobody prepares you for how shocking it is when it happens. Nobody. People just hide it from you.
Yeah, now the thing is, when it comes to Buddhism and all, we are taught about that, from early childhood. You need to expect that. But when it happens to you,
it's something else. Buddhism is incredibly sophisticated, and sometimes I feel that it's too sophisticated for the animals that we are, So the philosophy is there, it's all explained. But we as animals, we just can't cope when it happens, So anyway, moving on.
Great, super.
Can't dwell all these sad things all the time.
I understand. So again, I will just ask this question. Now we talk more about literature, what you've done, and all those writing parts. From a deep inside perspective, so I want to, unlock the Ashok Ferrey, not the writer, the human being, right? what you see yourself as a person, and what sort of you know what is the energy that drives you to focus on the things you do, wake up every day, and do what you want to do. That I just want to know. Yeah.
I think, first of all, it's too grandiose to think that we focus on things. I don't think we do, really. I think in my life, certainly, there's been a lot of accident. I said in a TED talk that I did quite recently that you are in a boat in the middle of the ocean, and your job is, it's a sailboat. Your job is to trim your sails to catch the breeze and go whichever way the breeze blows you. Now, you need to be aware that you're going in a certain direction, but you need to be prepared to go wherever the wind takes you, to go where the music takes you, as the song goes. And I think my life has always been like that. It's, you plan, once you're in a little box, you know that you're in that box and you plan it minutely. But you also know that at a certain point you will leave that box and move into another box. So the thing is to be prepared to move to that next box, but not necessarily dwell on that future. So it's like climbing a series of mountains. You concentrate on the peak directly in front of you. You have a nasty suspicion that when you get to the top of that peak, you will find 7 other peaks beyond, even higher, that you'll have to climb. But if you think about those other 7, you will never climb the first one. Because you'll be so afraid and you'll be so daunted by the task that your life is an unending climbing of peaks. You mustn't think like that. You must just concentrate on the first one. Or better still, just look down at your feet. Be aware that you're climbing, but watch your feet. So in other words, it's really difficult what I'm suggesting here. You have to concentrate on the minute things of life. Do them well. And then you will find you will come to the end of that minute series of steps. And then you're ready for that next thing. So be aware that there will be a next thing, but don't dwell on too much, because if you do, you will never fulfill the minute steps well. And I think your life has to be a fulfilling of those minute steps to the best of your ability. You just don't forget that you can only ever do the best you can. You can't do better than that. If you do it in a half-assed way, then you'll be guilty for the rest of your life. You'll think, did I give it everything? And if you have to answer truthfully, no, I didn't give it everything, then you've lost. You have to give it everything. So in my life, to get back to the very roundabout answer to the question, I've gone in different directions. So at Oxford, I was a pure mathematician. I loved it, absolutely loved it, because maths for me still is the one first and only love of my life. It's perfection. You have to discover it. It is always there. It's not like physics, where you discover things and your perceptions alter as time goes on, and you find that what you knew 5 years ago is now wrong, and now you're told this is actually the new theory. Maths doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
Once you discover something in maths, it's there for life. And it is you who are the fool who are stumbling around discovering these things. The maths was always there. Okay, so that was maths at Oxford. I came down from Oxford, and for some strange, stupid reason, I decided I wanted to stay on in England. I didn't have a visa. So I went underground. I did lots of illegal things and worked in that, what I call below the net, where people hire you. They know you don't have a visa. They hire you because you don't have a visa, so they can pay you less.
Yeah.
So I worked as a laborer on building sites, being paid half of what a proper English laborer might have been paid. And I drifted into the world of building, which I loved. It was so different from the mathematics. It was actually geometry, volumes, because I ended up designing and not building. Building is too grand a word. Converting old houses into apartments. And that's to do with volumes and how you convert and so on. Anyway, won't go into that. But I drifted into that, and I did that for 8 years. And there again, I said to myself, at the age of 30, I'm going to pack up and go back to Sri Lanka. I always had this mythical idea of Sri Lanka. I had left Sri Lanka at the age of 8, on my eighth birthday. So I still speak Sinhala like an 8-year-old. I mean, it's okay. I can build houses as an 8-year-old, but posh Sinhala is non-existent, I have to tell you. I can't read proper books or anything. Anyway, so I decided, come 30, good, bad, or indifferent, I'm going to get the hell out of England. 30 came, and the money was so good. It was the years of Margaret Thatcher. It was a lucky time to be in the building trade. I was in absolutely the right spot in England, in a place called Brixton, which was, for want of a better way of describing it, it was a Kalu area.
Okay.
So it was quite crime-ridden, drug-ridden. If you took a taxi, people stopped at Clapham North, which is the bounds of respectability, and said, "Get out now. You walk from here onwards." They wouldn't take a taxi in. Yeah, so it was very violent. But I loved it. It was great for me. It worked. And what really happened was many of those houses were turned into flats, and young, yuppie white couples came in to buy those. Now, I'm not going to go into the morality of young white people taking over elderly black people's houses, because there's a whole 2 hours of discussion there. What happened was I was just a pawn in this game. I was a builder. It worked. And 8 years later, I turned 30 and I was reluctant to go. I left 2 months before my 31st birthday, because I said to myself, I'll be 30. And still 2 months before 31, I was still 30. Strictly speaking, I was still 30. Got that. A month later, the property market in London peaked. By the end of that year, I left in July. In August, September, the market peaked. By December, it had crashed. So if I had stayed on, I would have lost everything.
Everything, yeah.
So it's like you let the wind blow you, and you don't really know why it's blowing you. Yeah. It's only later you look back and you think, my God, if I'd stayed there, that shark would have come and bitten my leg off or whatever. So you got to give yourself that freedom to allow these forces to take charge of you. But you can't be foolish and think, la-di-da, let me, it's not all love and joy. You have to be intelligent and be aware of where the wind is blowing you, but you have to be open-minded enough to let yourself go. Does that make sense?
It's intuition.
Yes, it's intuition. It's also, I think, just being open and being honest with yourself that you don't really know where you want to go.
Yeah. Because
we don't. If truth be told, anyone who tells you, I knew I was going to be prime minister from the day I was born, well, that's a load of bollocks, You have to be honest and say to yourself, well, look, I'd like to do this. I'd like to be prime minister. I'd like to be an engine driver. Yeah. I'd like to be an astronaut. But maybe that's not going to happen. But at the same time, if there's a chance that you're going to be hired to train as an astronaut, well, maybe you should take it. You can't also tell yourself, oh God, that's too difficult. I can't get into that. I'm not capable of it. You got to be moder enough, foolish enough to attempt these things. Now, I wasn't qualified to be a builder, because being a pure mathematician does not qualify you to be anything, frankly. Yeah. But to be foolish enough to think, well, I can be a builder and convert houses into flats, or come back to Sri Lanka and be foolish enough to think I can be a writer. It's the act of a fool, the act of a slightly wise fool to think, well, maybe give it a go. But you also have to be wise enough to know that if after 2 years you're writing absolute rubbish and nobody's interested in your books, then you need to stop and maybe think, what has the world got in store for me? Maybe it's not writing, maybe it's something else.
True. That's a very interesting story, and it's very interesting, and that gives me a lot of thoughts. It's like you keeping that open mind and also seeking to be uncomfortable. Being comfortable of being, being that, getting ready to anything that comes your way. Something like that.
Be prepared to put yourself on the edge. Because all too often, when you know too much, it stops you going to the edge. So I always tell, when I give writing workshops, I always tell writers, don't know too much. The worst writers are academics, because they know too much. So they know Shakespeare, they know Dostoevsky, they know Tolstoy, they know this one, they know that one. Then they won't write a thing. because they'll think, oh God, this is too much like Tolstoy. This is like page 52 of War and Peace. I can't write this. I must stop. Don't be foolish to write what you feel. And if it happens to be similar to somebody else, well, so what? It doesn't matter. It's what you think. It's valid for you as it is for anyone else. Whereas if you're an academic and you know too much, you'll think, oh God, I'm stop right there. That's no good because it's too much like somebody else's writing. So anyway, that was just an
No,
interruption.
true. That being authentic is something our guys are very scared to do, right?
Scared.
What will others think of what I'm
Yeah.
writing?
Yeah. And I think that's a huge, you've hit the nail absolutely on the head. In the East, because we are such an ancient civilization, that works against us. That ancientness, the very ancientness that we praise, is our biggest drawback. If you look at countries that do really well, they have very young civilizations, like America, which was created just like day before yesterday, as far as we're concerned. 200 years? What's 200 years? That's just the blink of an eyelid. But that also helps them. They don't have a track record behind them, so they're free to invent. We are not. So if you're an architect here, you're always compared to the fabulous architecture of 2000 years ago. So that puts a damper on us. We're afraid. Or if you're a writer, you're compared to the fabulous literature that we have from 1000 years ago. So you need to close off look forward. Don't see what's behind you. Be aware that it's really great, but don't let that make you nervous. It's like performing a play and having a really good actor in the audience. It puts you off. You're always aware that there's somebody there who's judging you. Well, true good writing comes from being able to be unaware of people looking over your shoulder. And that's, I think, a real fault with us in Sri Lanka. We're too aware of and too afraid of what other people will say, and too aware of their judgment of us.
You need to close your ears and
exactly
do it.
Close your ears and close your eyes.
Eyes, that's right.
Just go into your mind. Just go into your mind, and be unafraid. And that's the other thing. We're always afraid of sticking our neck out. Because, of course, if you write about an alcoholic, don't you know you're an alcoholic? All your aunties will say, what child, didn't you know he drinks a bottle of arak every day? Because you've written about an alcoholic, they assume you are. So it cramps our style here, because we're all connected to each other, and a judgment is passed very easily. It's much easier being a writer in the West where nobody knows you. And I think that's one of the reasons why so many Sri Lankans just go blindly to other countries, because they're unknown and they're free as a result. Here we're not free. Everybody's judging us. Everybody's only too ready to get the fist and come down on top of you. They won't attempt anything themselves, but they're only too ready to criticize you when you attempt.
Others. That's the thing. I think that's a huge thing we talked about. I think something that culture, that mind of thinking should change. I think it's slowly changing now.
It is.
It's changing.
One of the
but
reasons
still, that older generation tries to bring that forward once in a while. I mean, in schools, even schools, education system and all, that should be changed. I mean, I think they are trying to change it, but still, that happens once in a while, and the kids become, very backward.
I mean, what happens in schools is that you're taught to learn by heart the answers to the questions.
Correct.
I mean, that's not learning. So when a young Sri Lankan then goes abroad and he has to think for himself, he's perfectly okay. He's perfectly intelligent, and he quite often goes to the top of the tree. But here, there's an accepted way. What you have by-hearted, as we say, what you have by-hearted is the accepted way, and that's all there is. I once had to give a talk in a school. I won't mention the school, it's a very famous one. And I was sitting in the principal's office having my little spring roll and my iced coffee, waiting to go on stage. And class after class came to see the principal. I said, please, can we listen to Mr. Ferrey? And the principal said, of course you can. Why? What's stopping you? And one student answered and said, well, our teacher thinks that there's a danger that if we listen to him, he might give us the wrong answer to a question. In other words, the teacher was afraid that if I say something that wasn't the correct answer, the child might be marked down in the exam because that was not the answer they had memorized. So that is quite interesting. Anyway, at the end of the day, I had 700 people in the audience, so I had the last laugh. But there was an active decision that children shouldn't listen to outside influences. It might affect them badly, and they might lose their position in life by going down that other route. So an interesting insight into our lives here.
True. That's something that I'm trying to also, tell my kids also. Try to be open. You can look at the theory, but use that theory and try to be open and learn something from that.
Absolutely.
And try to experiment from your side. That's the thing we have to give.
Exactly. And be honest to yourself. If it strikes you that the theory is wrong, there is nothing wrong with questioning it. You may be proved wrong yourself, and you may find finally that the theory was correct. But there's nothing wrong with questioning it and asking questions around it.
So I wanted to ask you again. I know you were writing your style, own style and your thoughts. Any writers that inspired you? I mean, obvious that comes to my mind is Shakespeare and Tolstoy and those guys.
Well, no, actually, I hadn't read any of those guys. Now I'm quickly trying to play catch up, reading a few. I read one the other day. My friend Shyam Selvadurai lent me his copy. He said, "I'm lending it to you. I have power of recall it," and I read it and I loved it. But that was Ia Pereda, as they say. It was like about 2 years ago I read it after 20 years of writing books. So the thing is, this is something I tell all young people: read what you like. Just read. I don't care if you just read a newspaper or read a laundry list. Just read. Keep reading. So for me, I love humor. I think humor, and I've discovered now that South Asia has very few humorous writers. Very, very few. So if you have it, run with the ball. If you have it, and I really do think it's a God-given quality. And technically, it's very difficult to write humor. It's far easier to write tragedy. Comedy is very difficult to write because one comma, one full stop out of place, one wrong word, and you lose the joke.
And it could create different mindset as well.
Yes.
Is he joking or he's insulting? That kind of a small difference is subtle difference there, right?
Subtle difference. And the other thing is if you have to explain the joke to somebody, it is no longer fun. So you have to catch the reader in that first explosion of laughter. If they have to go back on it, it's not funny. If somebody else then has to explain it, it is simply, you failed. You as the writer, you failed. So I like authors who are funny. But there's also something else, and this is probably my Catholic background. They say Catholics are heavily into guilt. We're taught at a young age that there are certain things wrong, certain things right, and you spend the rest of your life worrying about what you did wrong. The moral question. So I particularly like writers who deal with that moral question. And there are very few, again. There's a writer called Graham Greene, which no young person has ever heard of, but he was immensely popular. He's a mid-20th century writer. And all his books were either very funny, or if they were serious, they dealt with these moral topics of who was the good person, who was the bad, who chose the right thing to do, or there's a moral conundrum. So in all my books, although they tend to be funny, there's a moral question. Why, if there is a God above, why did he kill 37,000 people, Sri Lankans, in the tsunami? And that's the question at the bottom of my book, The Ceaseless Chatter of Demons. It's a very funny book. But underneath is this question: if God is good, why does he allow so many deaths? And so on and so on. I needn't go into it because, in a way, there again, if you explain the conundrum, it loses its value. It's something for you to think about when you read. But what you're reading is something funny and entertaining and feel good. But underneath, there is another much deeper, darker question, which you don't need to get to now. Because you read that book 5 years later, it's a different book. The book hasn't changed. You have changed.
Right. So that question brings me to another question to ask you. Do you believe in fate? And do you think fate can be changed? I mean, sometimes,
Very, very interesting you brought that out,
yeah.
because that is the subject of the book I'm writing at the moment.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah.
I just gave it to my daughter to read,
Yeah.
the very first thing, and she says it's unpublishable. People will hate you if they read this book. Don't send this book out. It's too bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think young people like everything cut and dried and explained. And we older people, we know that nothing is cut and dried, and there are things you can't explain. You know, so to get back to this thing about fate, you see, there are different ways of looking at it. There are people who give in to their karma. They are absolutely subservient to it. If this is what karma wants me to do, this is what I will do. If it's raining outside, karma decided that I shouldn't go to school today because I'll get wet and I might catch a chill, I might die. So karma has decreed that I stay at home today. Then there are others who ride that karma like a horse. They make the horse jump. They make the horse do all sorts of things. They make him gallop. And I admire those people also. But I'm not sure I'm one of those. I'm something in between. And I think most of us are somewhere in between on this question. So, of course, fate exists, you know? And there is even a mathematical, because I'm a mathematician, I can understand that somebody, not you, not us, not any of us, we are in our lives. And here I'm going out on a limb. Please forgive me because this is a bit abstract and a bit abstruse. We are within these three dimensions and within the dimension of time. So our lives, we are born, we live our lives, we die. And in that time, we have free will. We can go this way, we can go that way. And in a way, fate doesn't exist because we have the free will. However, if you think of yourself as a being outside those four dimensions, looking down, so all the time of your life is concentrated in one single point. Everything, every trip you made on earth is concentrated there. Because I'm outside, I can see it. If you look like that, then of course there's fate, because I was fated to live this life in these areas. I was fated to die in Greenland of a chill, because me living outside this system or existing outside can see that. So to that person, of course fate exists. Everything is there. It's preordained because you were born, you lived, you died while I was outside in that split second. If you think of a fruit fly, they say that a fruit fly, I'm wrong, I'm not a biologist, but follow me on this, that the life of a fruit fly is only a few seconds. So to us, looking at the fruit fly, that fruit fly is born and it dies in, I don't know whether it's 2 seconds, it may be 1 day or 2 days or 1 week, but you get my point. To us, that fruit fly is fated to live inside that fruit, peck away, and then die. But to the fly, that's an entire lifetime. You know? So anyway, that's enough mathematics. We're going into, it's what I did at Oxford. So the mathematics works for different dimensions and it exists. But when I go to literary festivals and I talk about this, people start yawning and they fall asleep. So I've got to stop right there.
No, that's correct. I mean, even a moth, is destined to go and hit a light, and they need that light. They know it will hurt and it will kill them, but they move towards that. They are attracted to that.
Yes.
It's something that's their system is designed, and whole thing is designed to act like that. For outside, you will feel little one can we know it, but a kid will say that animal is crazy. Why is and going and hitting the light when it knows it will get burned?
Because we're outside, we can see that
is
predestined to die on the light bulb. But the moth thinks it has free will. To the moth, it can go anywhere. The fact that it chooses to go to the light, it's still free will. So I don't see a contradiction here. I think both can exist. Fate as well as free will can exist. Anyway, read all about it in the new book when it comes out. It's about 1 year away. Although if my daughter has anything to do with it, she'll say, no, this is not publishable.
Publish
So,
it. I am telling you, go and publish it. I mean,
yes, publish and damned, as they say, publish and damned.
super, super bio. So, next one I wanted to ask you. So, what do you feel about Sri Lanka as a whole? We have all these people going away from the country, and we are, election is coming up, and all these things are happening. As a country, we have a very beautiful island, people, very beautiful people with so many, ideologies and cultures and everything. What do you think Sri Lanka as a country can do to move forward? Because what I feel is, people will criticize me for telling this. Although we are a country, again that same theory comes. When we are inside the country, we see it as a great country, lot of things. But when from outside, when you look at outside, I think Sri Lanka has a long way to go. Compete with lot of other countries. Let's take India, our neighbor. Right? Yeah, true, it's a huge country, but only a few people are rich and who can control the country as from a money point of view, from a business point of view. That's not very set. It's very small kind of a set of people, but overall the country is very poor. When you take India, but still the world map, they are in a stage where they can achieve things. I take you a very simple example.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, I just want to ask you, what, as a country, your thoughts, uh, what Sri Lanka can do to improve itself from, from a literature point of view, from culture point of view. This is just an open question.
Yeah,
I want to know
think
your answer.
I think
Yeah,
quite simply, it is paradise on earth. Quite simply, there is nowhere else I would live
100%.
for this one, frankly. But that fact of it being a paradise is also its biggest curse. Because when you as a human being are put in paradise, you're not happy. You always want more. You always want other things. If you live in hell, where it freezes, where there are seasons and it's either raining or you're frozen to death and nothing grows on the trees and you have to work hard to earn a living, then you appreciate paradise much more. We who live in paradise don't appreciate it. We're always thinking the grass is greener elsewhere. So people are very willing to leave paradise and go off and go to the Middle East or go to England, go somewhere and clean other people's lavatories and earn, at the end of the day, not very much money. They still prefer that to living in paradise and also not having too much money. I mean, that's our problem here. We are given this idea that things are so much better elsewhere, and we go. And very few of us leave and come back with that money. You get trapped into that other way of life where you are a slave to the system and you have to keep working for the rest of your life to keep that standard going. The alternative is to live in Sri Lanka at a much lower standard, but be happy within that standard. So again, it's a question that has no perfect answer. I think what we as Sri Lankans need to do is be aware of what we have and be aware of how quite bad it is elsewhere. You see, other Sri Lankans come back from slaving their guts out in these other countries and they give us stories of paradise over there. Oh gosh, I earn $20,000, I do this, I do that. Yes, that may be the truth, but that $20,000 vanishes when you fall ill and there's no free health care and you have to pay for a private doctor and you don't have insurance. Or there are lots of stories like that. Or you're working, because what they're doing is they're comparing those euros or those dollars with our local money. You can't do that because our local rupees buy us so much more in our local money. If you bring those euros and dollars back, of course they'll buy stuff. but you don't bring them back. You keep them there. Now, over there, those euros and dollars really don't buy you that much. They probably buy you a little bit more than the rupee will buy us here, but not that much more. So 20, 30 years down the line, you find at the end of your life, and I can say this because I'm an old man now, that you haven't progressed that much more in those countries. Perhaps, just perhaps, you might have been better off enjoying the few rupees that you had here and having your family around you, having a climate that's God-given, having a landscape that's God-given, and having probably, possibly the best food in the world. But we don't count that.
Yeah.
We'd rather starve and eat carrots and potatoes than have our lovely malungs and our gotukola and our nibiti and whatever. So it's a really difficult question. And anyway, people will criticize me and say, oh, yes, but he's been abroad, so he can afford to condemn it. I haven't been abroad, so I need to try it out. Yes, that's true. You do need to try it out. Of course. We all, in a perfect world, every Sri Lankan would be sent abroad for 9 months, 10 months, 1 year. Every Sri Lankan, to see how bad life is in other places. For that reason alone, you know. But we're not. So yes, it's rich for me to criticize other places, having lived there and having made my money. The only thing I could suggest is go there, make your money, come back as soon as you can. Don't fall into the trap of waiting. Now, how do we improve Sri Lanka? I think we need to look at it from an outsider's point of view. Have you ever noticed how when we're in Sri Lanka, no two Sri Lankans can ever agree on anything? Yeah. You know, it's endemic in a paradise culture. In a cultural paradise, Evelyn Waugh, one of my favorite writers, called it divine discontent. He had this phrase, divine, because the discontent is divine. In other countries, say perhaps in India or say in the West, where there are seasons where it gets cold, you have to work hard. If you don't work hard, you'll starve. In those countries, they don't have time to be discontent. We have the time. Why do we have the time? Because we're living in paradise. Life is so easy here. It makes it so easy for us to be unhappy with it.
We take things for granted.
We take things for granted, and we're so fond of criticizing. You know, the number
spending
of people
time on criticizing.
That's the. I mean, we are Olympic champions in criticizing. We would win the gold, the silver, the bronze, and everything else in between. You know, if criticizing was an Olympic sport. I read in today's paper that 10 to 11 people commit suicide in Sri Lanka every day. Every day. I don't know how true it is. 10 to 11 every day. But you also hear this story of the farmer who comes back from the field and his wife has made a kirikos for lunch and there's not enough salt in it. So as a sign of protest, he gets a rope and goes and hangs himself in the barn. Now you will think that's an Ashok Ferrey story. That's really common here.
Yeah.
Why? Because we cannot, tolerate anything that is not within our system. You know, we're very happy, very quick to criticize. In other countries, you'd be grateful to have a jackfruit curry in front of you. You'd be grateful to have a wife who will cook that curry and put it in front of you. Because otherwise you'd starve. But here, we can afford the criticism. We can go and hang ourselves as a sign of protest. So I see it as a Paradise Road syndrome. Not Paradise Road, sorry, that's a shop. A Paradise Country syndrome, you know, where you're never happy. You know, any government, no government are we happy with. They can do the best thing. They can drag you out of bankruptcy. They can put you up there. But we're not happy. No, we want something else. Let's try something new. Let's do this. Let's do that. That is the culture of a paradise country. And there are very few paradise countries in the world. We are one of them. Interestingly, if you read Charles Darwin, traveling around the world, excuse me, I have a fit of coughing. You might have to it.
No.
When he went to, I think it was Samoa or one of those paradise islands in the Pacific, and he talked about them. Well, they're a bit like us. Okay.
No.
Let's try it out. Let's try again.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have Charles Darwin who traveled in his ship called the Beagle, the Voyage of the Beagle it's called, and when he went to those Pacific islands, gosh, what he said about them was very similar to what I would say about Sri Lankans. So again,
Yeah.
it's a paradise climate. It's a lush climate. Anything grows. You drop a jackfruit seed into your garden and you'll find a koskaha in no time at all. You know? So it's funny how climate and circumstances affect genetics, or you can't really call it genetics, but it affects the way we as human beings behave. The colder the country, the harder they work. The really rich countries are in Northern Europe, Germany or Switzerland or Luxembourg or Holland. If you go further south in Europe, they're more like us. The Italians, the Spanish, the Portuguese. They love good music, they love wine, they love sitting around yakking like I'm doing now, you know. And they love to criticize the government. They do all the things that we do. Of course, we do it even in an even more extreme way.
Extreme.
So my advice to Sri Lanka, I think we need to look at reality, and that is difficult because fellow Sri Lankans don't tell us the reality. They come back from these other countries and they say, "My God, the streets are paved with gold. I did this, I did that." But actually, that's not the truth. I have a friend who went to America, and she went to another friend who had a very good life here, but he was actually the son of a minister, but he went there to America, and he had a small upholstering business. So this mutual friend, the other person, third person, came to him and said, "Can I borrow the money to go back to Sri Lanka? I need to buy a ticket to go back to Sri Lanka." So the other guy turned to her and said, "Well, you have 5 cars. Why don't you sell the Mercedes, and that will give you enough money to fly home?" And she said, "I can't do that. My neighbor has 5 cars. What would they think?" So, and this is at the top end of the scale. This is not a migrant worker in the Middle East. These are wealthy people, in the States. So you get into that trap. Because your neighbor has 5 cars, you got to have 5 cars, So there's no reality check, and yet you don't have enough money to fly back to home to Sri Lanka. Anyway, interesting story. But the fact is that we end up in these mazes, for want of a better word, and we as Sri Lankans were not able to cope with that maze, because our life here is relatively simple. It's easy, it's good, it's simple. But in those countries, it's not simple, it's not easy. It's complex, and you have to work really hard to keep on that. You have these little wheels that hamsters go on, you see them, and you're like a hamster on a wheel in those countries. You're running and running and running to keep up, to keep in the same place, essentially.
So many, I think it's all lot of things to do with the mindset, right? I think it's the mindset in many cases.
It's that divine discontent that we all have. I have it here. Every day of my life, I get up and I complain, and I think to myself, get a hold of yourself. You're living in paradise. Why are you complaining? All right, the trains don't run. Nobody bothers to clean that little fan. When you go in a train, you see the fan. It's full of dust. It's thick with dust. And the railway services are full of people. Isn't there somebody who can be employed to clean the fan? But okay, so I complain about all that. But the fact remains that the fan actually works and the trains run more or less on time. So why am I complaining? And train tickets are cheap. So affordable. So why am I complaining?
True. Great. Okay, Ashok. That's a superb explanation. And actually, today has been a very, and for a day like this, to get, very gloomy day. Things when you lose hope, when we have discussions like this, you bring new hope and, new thinking as well. Thank you so much for.
I hope. I'll probably leave this and complain bitterly about you, but anyway.
Thank you so much for, it's been a very inspiring chat with you. And thank you so much. And to end, just one last question. Ashok, so what are your future plans? What are you planning to do? And, what sort of I know you do the writing, and you are helping with all writing. What sort of support you can give to build a new set of writers in Sri Lanka,
Well,
when it comes to
let,
English
let,
literature and all. Yeah.
I'll tell you one good story. I just had to judge a short story competition run by Dilma, who sponsored it.
Okay.
And there were, I think, 130 entries, of which I read 100, because I told them, give me just 100, that's all I can manage. And they were very good. I was really impressed by the standard of those stories, And I thought, wow, if we can write like this, there's a new generation, not our generation, it's too late for us, but the new generation, there's a lot of very good writers coming up. I hope they continue, because it's very easy to give up. And also remember this, real life catches up, and your parents will tell you, you have to be a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant. And that's true. You have to, we're not living in a rich country, so you probably have to look after your parents one fine day, or your elderly aunts, uncles, whoever. And life is not that easy. And you don't earn so much money. So you will have to have another career, probably. But never mind. The writing, if you allow the writing to come out of you, it will. It's like toothpaste in a tube. If you leave the cap open, the toothpaste will come out. Just remember that. All your job is to leave yourself open to that writing to come out. Your job is not to say, I will never be a writer, I'm too busy, I have to study for my medical exams, I have to study for my CMA or my BMA or my CHIMA. It doesn't matter. Leave the possibility that there is a writer inside you. Or anything else. It need not be a writer, it could be a painter, it could be a potter, it could be a musician. Leave the possibility open. Musicians are more difficult because you have to practice every day. Well, make some time. Make some time to practice. Even a writer has to read. You'll never be a writer if you don't read, because it's what you're regurgitating is what you have read over your previous lifetime. So leave that option open. Don't close it off. Who knows? The best writers in the world are ones who didn't begin as writers. They were something else. All these great writers have other careers. We're not all lucky to have an independent income that'll tell us you can sit down and write now, or take 2 months off, or take 2 years off. We're not that lucky. We have to do other things. When I write, I sit in a room and the kids are playing music, the dogs and the cats and this and that, everything is there. You just have to learn to tune out, to zone out, and do your own thing. But keep that space in your mind.
Stop the complaints, right? Stop the complaints.
Stop complaints. Other complaints will fill that space, But keep that space in your mind open for something to fill it, and you'll be surprised at what fills it.
Great. Again, that famous saying will come to the picture: to be or not to be, it's in your hands, right?
Yeah. Exactly. It's in your hands. But leave yourself open for either option.
Yeah, great, superb. Thank you, Ashok, for today's very insightful and very inspiring discussion I had. This is kind of chat is something that motivates me, to bring myself up, to develop a new version of myself. I hope anyone who's watching this or listening to this will get inspired, they will also get that thinking. Look at things very different and stop complaining, right? And, look at things differently and improve yourself, maybe professionally or personally, anything what you do. So
yeah, whatever you do, you've got to give it your best shot. You can't do it half. You've got to go into it. Give it your best. And if you're no good at it, that's also okay. Move on.
Yeah.
No one's going to laugh at you. Just move on.
Super. Great. Thank you so much, Ashok, for your time today. And I
Thank you,
wish you
Chamindra.
all the very best, and looking forward to your new book. And I hope you share
Yeah,
those new
I hope
details.
I hope I hope it gets banned.
Do share it when you publish it. So and definitely we'll be looking forward to that. And I wish you all the very best, good health, and all the very best in everything you do.
You too. Right? You too. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Ash. Okay.
Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.